All right, in this fourth video, section 1.1, oh, hold on, let me get my ears on. I know you can hear me, but it does better with these. Okay, in this fourth video, section 1.1, we're going to close out, and I'm going to show you how to solve equations that have decimals in it. Now, before I do this, let me say say the same thing that I did with fractions. You don't have to solve the equations with fractions the way that I'm showing you. There's multiple ways, but it's the way that I feel like is the best, or the easiest, or the quickest, if you will. So, and that's what I would suggest you follow, but that's strictly up to you as long as you're getting the right solution. All right, before I do that, let me remind you of something about decimals. First of all, remember that every decimal, first, remember, if I write the number 23, that's a decimal, even though I don't refer to it as a decimal. It's just the decimal is understood at the end. So 23 and 23.0 is the same thing. So just like every number is a fraction, like if I say the number 8, if I ask you, is 8 a fraction, you might say no, but it actually is. It's 8 over 1. So if I say the number 23, does it have a decimal in it? Yes, it's just at the end. So we don't typically call it a decimal. But I'm talking about equations where the decimal is not at the end of the number. Now remember, anytime a decimal is in a problem that's not at the end of the number, every decimal can be written as a fraction. For instance, 0.3 is the same thing as 3/10. 0.03 is 3/100. 0.014 is 14, but that's to the 1,000ths, which will reduce, by the way. So if a decimal needs to be moved one place, it's in the 10th spot. 2 places, it's in the 100th spot. 3 places, it's in the 1,000th spot. So what is a decimal? It's a fraction. But it's not just a regular fraction. It's a fraction where the denominator is a 1 followed by a certain number of zeros. So every decimal, the denominator is either a 10 or 100 or 1,000. Now, if you view it as a fraction, look at the denominators, 10, 100, and 1,000. How do we get rid of fractions? By multiplying through by the least common denominator. So if a decimal is a fraction where the denominator is either a 10 or 100 or 1,000, what we're going to do is we're going to multiply through by either a 10 or 100 or 1,000 to get rid of the decimals. Now you say, well, how do you know which one you need to multiply by? Depends upon how far the decimals need to be moved. And I'll explain that when we get to the problems. So to get rid of decimals, I'm going to do it the same way I do fractions. I'm going to multiply either by the LCD, but the LCD will either be a 10 or 100 or 1,000. Let me show you what I mean by that. All right, once again, let me remind you, you have already copied this problem down. So let me just put it up right here. So this one you already have copied. All right, first of all, notice, and by the way, most books will put a 0 in front of that decimal, and a 0 in front of that one, and a 0 in front of this one right here. So if there's a 0 in front of that decimal, or you leave it off, it's the same thing. So I could put a 0 right there as well. I just don't want to try to punch it in. All right, look at the decimals now. This 0.02, this is 2, what place is that to? That's 1/100ths. This is 0.1, that's 1/10, because it only needs to be one place. This is not a decimal, it is, but it's at the end. This is 0.04, so that's 4 what? 100ths. So this is a denominator 100. This is a denominator 10. This is a denominator 1. This is a denominator 100. All right, so you got a 10 and a 100. So what are you going to have to multiply by to get rid of a 10 and a 100? you're going to have to multiply by 100. But remember, we said when you multiply a side, it has to be every term on both sides. So let's see how many terms we've got. This is one term, plus, this is another term, equal, this is another term, plus, this is another term. So we've got two terms over here, two terms over here. So we're going to multiply by 100 by all four of these. So I'm going to put 100 by all four of those. Now, I don't know why I put the parentheses around this like that. Well, I do, but you don't have to put them. So anyway, all right, so put 100, 100, 100, 100. Now, remember, this is two 100ths. So the 100ths will cancel, and it's just going to leave 2. Or, if that confuses you, just take your calculator and take 100 times 0.02. But I'll remind you, whenever you multiply something by 100, it moves your decimal 2 places from where it's at. So it moves it 2 places. All right, so if you multiply by 100, it moves this 2 places. 1, but you have to move it 1 more place. That's why that's 10. Or just use your calculator. Now, 3 times 100, of course, is 300. And then 0.04 times 100 moves it 2 places and gives you 4x. Now, all of the decimals are at the end. So, essentially, there's no decimals in the problem, is the way we would say that. Now, you're back to that same 2-step process. X is on one side, numbers on the other. And there it is again. AX equal B. Divide by the coefficient to get negative 145. Now, I didn't spin my wheels long there because we've already been over that enough. So, okay. Now, let's look at this next problem. And again, this could be 0.18, same thing, y, plus 0.04 times y plus 3,000 equals 2,100. All right. Let's look and see what place our decimals are to. This is 18 100ths, 4 100ths. So my decimals in this problem is to the 100 spot. So I'm going to multiply through by 100. Here's where you have to be careful. When you multiply by 100, remember it needs to be every term, both sides. So when I multiply, I've got to multiply both sides by 100. Now, let's see how many terms we have. Okay, here's my equal sign. 0.18y, that's my first term. So I'm going to put a 100 right there. When you get to right here, this is not 2 terms. And the reason it's not is because that's multiplication. Now, if that was a plus or a minus sign, that would be 2 terms. But this, because of the multiplication, is considered to be 1 term. Now, here's what some students will ask. They'll say, Mr. Reiner, can I distribute this first? You can. And that would make it 2 terms then. Then you could multiply 3 by 100. So you could distribute first or just multiply 3 by 100. That's what I prefer to do. But you'll get the same answer either way if you do it correctly. So I'm going to put a 100 by this one, a 100 by this one. Not going to do it by both of these. 1 100. 100, 100, but don't forget over here, 100. All right, so show you what that looks like. And again, these outer parentheses is not necessary. So put 100 by this one, 100 by that, not 2 100s, and 100 by that one. Okay. What does 100 do? It's going to move that to 18y. What's 100 going to do here? It's going to move that to 4. But you don't multiply 100 by both of these. It's just 100 by that. Now you say, well, after we do that, do we need to distribute? Yes. I'll do that in the next step. I'm not going to try to do that at once. So here's what I get when I do this. 100 by the 0.18y is 18y. Plus 100 times the 0.04 just gives me 4. Leave that alone. I'll distribute it in the next step. Equals, and then 100 times 2100 becomes 210,000. Now distribute with the 4. That'd be 4y plus 12,000. Add the y's together to get 22y. Subtract 12,000 from both sides. Use your calculator to subtract that. And then divide by 22 to get even 9,000. So this concludes all of section 1.1. And now go to section 1.1 in MyLabs Plus homework and do that full assignment. Next section will be, I think it's section 1.2 video.